Welcome into the College Football Power Hour. I'm Caroline Fenton. That is Jason Fitz, and he is Adam Breneman. And the most recent edition of the College Football Playoff rankings have arrived. Now, no change in the top five in the rankings. Oregon is 1, Ohio State is 2, Texas is 3, Penn State is 4, Indiana is 5, Notre Dame up to 6, Alabama at 7, Miami at 8, Ole Miss at 9. And I think the most intriguing thing about round 3 of these rankings was how much higher will Georgia go and how much further will Tennessee drop after Tennessee's loss in Athens. Georgia is at 10, so they now find themselves back into the college football playoff race. Tennessee at 11, Boise State at 12, and SMU on the outside looking in of the top 12 at 13. But important to remember, those are rankings, and the college football playoff is all based off of seedings, which a little bit of inside baseball. We've been sitting here for the last 15 minutes trying to figure out the actual seedings and the matchups in the playoff. Fitz, your initial reaction to these rankings and how the playoff would shake out if the CFP was tomorrow?
Look, I think first and foremost, we need to acknowledge here the system's broken already. And the system's broken because you can't explain it in a way that's concise and clear to everybody. And I'm getting killed still for the video last week where I was saying there's a problem, the Georgia's ranked in one place by the committee, but doesn't make the college football playoff. And people coming in and saying, well, who cares? There's plenty of football left to be had. Well, what do we have now? BYU is the 14th seed. But again, because they are presumed the Big 12 champion, they would move in to the 12 spot. So they get in, and all of a sudden you're looking at first round buys for teams that nobody sat here and thought would, like Boise State getting a first round buy. That's just not what anybody presumed would happen. A Boise State team that the committee is telling you is the 12th best. This is what's so confusing about it. I feel like you have to have an abacus and a calculus degree and a Texas Instrument calculator. Adam, I feel like college football is losing if we can't sit here and easily explain the why, the how, the when of who gets ranked and then where they get seated.
I don't even know what we're looking at, Fitz. I don't know how to follow who's playing who gets in, who gets out. Now BYU's the 12 seed. College football got it right by expanding the playoff, but now college football needs to fix this playoff system for how we figure out who's in the playoff. The NFL has done it the right way for a long time. They have division champions, and the best teams in each division, conferences would be the equivalent of college football, get in the playoff, and the best teams in those conferences get the first round bye. Why do we even have conference championship games? Why can the 20th ranked team play a team? Well, because of money. But it makes no sense. It makes no sense. Some of these teams would rather even not play in the conference championship game because they're guaranteed a first-round bye versus losing in the conference championship game. This whole system of how we get to who is in the playoff and who plays who and the first-round buys and the actual ranking versus seeding is flawed in college football. But boy, is it exciting to talk about. I will say that. It's fun to talk about, Fitz.
Here's the thing that I've got to stress to everybody. The College Football Playoff Committee ranks the teams. This week, in only the third week ever, only one team is seeded where they're actually ranked. And that's the number one team in all the land. Oregon is the number one ranking team and the number one seeded team. Every other team in this week's college football playoff rankings is not seeded in a way that matches their rankings. That's broken. That's not the way our college football forefathers did not anticipate this level of chaos and explanation required. I don't think it's good for the process. If people are looking at it if you've got people's eyes glazing over and they're saying, huh? I don't think that's good for the college football playoff process.
But in a way, I think it depends on how you look at it. Because I am very pro conference championship games should matter. If you're going to play them, have them matter, because if they don't mean anything, then don't even play them. And right now we're living in a college football society where money is the most important thing. So I don't think that anyone is going to, voluntarily raise their hand and say, no, we're good on the multi-million-dollar check that's going to come in after we play these games. So I like that conference champions get rewarded for winning their conference championship games because they should mean something. Now, all of that being said, if Miami won the ACC tomorrow, then Miami, the 8th overall ranked team, would be the 3 seed. Now that's funky. That's wonky. That doesn't feel fair. That doesn't feel right. But frankly, I don't know how we can build a college football playoff where someone doesn't get absolutely, positively screwed. And that's kind of how I look at the rankings versus the seedings each week is, all right, who's the team getting screwed? Last week, it was Georgia. They were the 12th ranked team, but would have been left out of the CFP due to seedings. This week, it's Tennessee. Tennessee is the 11th ranked team in the country. And there are a lot of people, in my household, in my family that were like, woohoo, we're still in the playoff. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Put it in reverse. No, you're not. Because you, in this scenario, you are the team that is getting screwed out of the college football playoff because even though the committee thinks that you are a top 12 team in the country, you get leapfrogged by BYU, who would get the 12 seed, who is the 14th ranked team, but would get the 12 seed in the college football playoff. Now, a lot of these things are going to work themselves out. We've got an Indiana-Ohio State game this weekend. Now, if Indiana beats Ohio State, well, that's a completely different conversation. If Indiana gets completely blown out, gets the doors blown off by Ohio State by 35 points, then I think that we have a serious and legitimate conversation about is Indiana deserving of being in the playoffs? Now, if Indiana is 11-1 and gets left out of the playoffs, there's a fair argument to be made that maybe Indiana gets screwed out of the playoffs in favor of a 10-2 Tennessee team or a 10-2 Ole Miss team or any myriad of 10-2 SEC teams that we're going to have at the end of the season. So it's not fair. But it's also sort of fair, but it's also not fair because someone is always going to get screwed, but someone is always going to get rewarded for winning their conference championship games.
A couple of thoughts, Caroline. You make great points. The first, on the SEC side, Ole Miss and Georgia look like they're in the best spot right now. Both ahead of Tennessee, and both will stay there given the results on the field, the timing. Georgia's done with SEC games. Now they play UMass this weekend. So those two teams look to be in pretty good spots and kind of control their own destiny now that they're ahead of Tennessee, which they should be. On the Big Ten side, I keep coming back in my mind to Indiana and what's going to happen when Indiana loses to Ohio State. Whether it's, I've said on the show before that as long as Indiana keeps this game within a 14-point margin, they'll be in the playoff. But, man, if Indiana loses by 12 points to Ohio State, Indiana's only win that's even respectable in their schedule is against Michigan. And Michigan is terrible. This is an Indiana team that played some brutal non-conference games. And we've seen the committee before have teams that have been undefeated, that have played really well, that lost a big game and had poor strength of schedule, get left out of the playoff. And I think there's going to be a lot of controversy if Indiana loses that game to Ohio State about whether a one-loss Indiana team that had the worst schedule in the Big Ten, they played the 6 bottom Big Ten teams, Indiana played all of them. That's how bad their schedule was, if they are deserving to be in the playoff versus a possible 3-loss Alabama team if they lose the conference championship game.
And they're going to play a 7th bottom team in the Big Ten at the end of the season when they play Purdue.
Let me scream something from the mountaintops, as I like to do. And I hope to God, if they clip off your portion of the Tennessee Vols conversation, I hope that this gets clipped off with it. Because the reaction that you're going to get, Caroline, is the same thing I've gotten all week when I talked about Georgia last week. Win your games. That's what everybody says, is win your games. Here's the one thing I will remind you. The College Football Playoff Committee just told us that despite the fact Tennessee didn't win their game, Tennessee is still deserving of being a playoff team. They did not put them out of the top 12. The College Football Playoff Committee, as instructed, has said, I know you lost. You're still a playoff team. It is not Tennessee's fault that the seeding system is what would prevent them from making the playoffs. That's what drives me crazy about this. It's that the committee tells you, we think, hey, you know what, Georgia, you lost a game. So last week you were teetering near that edge of not going to be top 12 anymore. The committee says, we don't care. We still think you're a top 12 team. The seeding prevents you from making the playoffs. This week, Tennessee loses. The committee tells you, hey, we still think you're a top 12 team. It's the seeding. So the argument of just win your games is flawed because it's not about winning your games. It's about the seeding, taking teams that the committee have told you are top 12 and just deciding that they don't get to be part of this. That's the thing that blows my mind.
And the seeding is so important. And head to head, at least in the SEC, is growing increasingly less significant to me because I know that there are going to be a lot, and I'm picking on Tennessee fans, but they're the perfect example of this, that I know that there are going to be Tennessee fans that are irate that Tennessee is the lowest ranked SEC team when they're sitting over here like, hey, we beat Alabama. We have the same number of losses as Alabama, and we beat them head to head. So why is Alabama sitting so comfortably in the number 7 spot, and we're sitting at 11 on the outside looking in? Again, if the playoff was tomorrow, there's still football left to be played. Well, okay, that's a very fair argument to be made that Tennessee beat Alabama, but Alabama beat Georgia, and Ole Miss beat Georgia, and Georgia beat Texas. The SEC has been so cannibalistic that while head-to-head it is an incredibly important metric traditionally in the college football playoff, or when we're talking about tiebreakers for conference championship games, well, we have 6 or 7 teams in the SEC that have all beaten up on each other. So now, Fitz, I don't think that head-to-head should be the number one most important thing. It should be a true body of work, quality of wins, and quality of losses.
It's a data point, not the data point. It's a data point. They got to weigh all of the data points. See, people always ask me for years, is it about strength of schedule or is it about the eye test? And I always said it's neither. It's about both. And then they come in and say, well, is it supposed to be the 12 best or the 12 most deserving? To which my answer has always been, it's honestly the 12 best of the 12 most deserving. It's a combination of all of this, in this situation. But here's the slippery slope. And look, I know football's going to take care of itself. In a chaotic year, what if, as we sit right now, Colorado State, according to the standings in the Mountain West, Colorado State is going to take on Boise State. What happens if Colorado State beats Boise State and Army loses to Notre Dame? Who's the highest ranked group of 5 team that even deserves to be in this thing? And we're sitting here saying, well, it's okay. It's Boise State. They belong in. And if they happen to get a 4 seed, what a great story. Boise State, if they lose in the Mountain West, look, UNLV this week made their way back in. We joke about that. But UNLV would not be the team they'd play in the Mountain West. It's Colorado State as of now. If Colorado State beats them, they're not a playoff team. If Army loses a game, Army still can't get a lot of street cred from the committee. If they lose to Notre Dame, they're not worthy. We could be sitting here talking about a bid thief that's not even a ranked team coming in and suddenly stealing a bid from a team like Tennessee. Y'all can't tell me that that's good for the sport. I don't think letting somebody that steals a bid that just limps into the playoffs suddenly get their ass kicked instead of putting a deserving team. It is ultimately good for the sport.
In the scenario that you just said, though, it would be Army if it's a close game against Notre Dame, who's undefeated the entire season, that loses maybe by a touchdown or 2, should be that team in the playoff, in my opinion.
I agree. But if they get railroaded by Notre Dame, then they're not even a top 25 team.
Exactly. It's different, and the whole conversation is different. Now, the other interesting scenario here is the Big 12. And what happens in the Big 12? I mean, for BYU, their loss against Kansas was lucky timing, because you'd rather lose that game than lose in the Big 12 championship game. The Big 12 is a one-bid conference right now, and it will be that way for the foreseeable future with all the chaos that this conference has. So you'd much rather lose against Kansas, still control some of your own destiny, where you can play in the Big 12 championship game. That game in Tempe this weekend, BYU Arizona State, is essentially a play-in game. It's a huge game, the biggest game that Arizona State's played in a long time. But BYU is probably happy they lost that game versus losing the Big 12 championship game, where they would have been out of the playoff for good.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Arizona State beats BYU. Arizona State's in the Big 12 title game, more likely than not playing Colorado. So if you're a team like SMU or a team like Tennessee, teams that are right up there on the outside looking in of the seedings, you probably are rooting like hell for Arizona State to beat BYU, because you don't want to leave any room for the committee to give a 1-loss BYU team that didn't win the conference title game. So I guess it would then be a 2-loss BYU team. You wouldn't want to give the committee any reason to say, well, okay, BYU beat a top 25 Kansas State team and a top 15 SMU team, that they have the quality of wins and just lost in their conference championship game. But I mean, Fitz, I think you point out a really key flaw in all of this, and that I love that the conference champions get rewarded for winning their conference, but also should every conference champion get rewarded for winning their conference? Maybe not every conference champion is deserving of getting rewarded in that kind of setting, in a college football playoff setting. I mean, we've already heard Lane Kiffin talk this week about how he doesn't think it's advantageous to play in the SEC championship game. We're talking about an Ole Miss program that has not won the SEC championship since 1963. Mississippi looked a lot different in 1963, and now they're all of a sudden saying, like, hey, the SEC championship game doesn't matter? Like, that is crazy to me, and that's a flaw.
The only thing we should give the committee credit for, I mean, maybe not even the committee, college football as a whole, is if the playoffs were tomorrow, we'd have some epic first-round playoff games. Ohio State, BYU, Alabama, Notre Dame. Can you imagine that? Georgia, Penn State, Ole Miss, Indiana. Does it get much better than those four matchups for the first-round playoff games? I mean, I'll take it. Georgia visiting Happy Valley. I mean, Alabama, Notre Dame.
Alabama and South Bend.
I'm getting chills. I'm getting chills down my spine right now thinking about that.
Yeah, Alabama at Notre Dame, right? Alabama at Notre Dame for a playoff game.
Good.
Oh my God. Cancel all my plans. Take it I don't care how we do this show from the sideline. I don't care if we have to steal our way in. We get into that game, we do it from the sideline. That's the way that one goes.
Listening to the broadcast in Athens, they were talking about how, I think it was Laura Rutledge on a sideline report, talked about how it was 55 degrees and how the bench warmers stopped working for Tennessee and how they were getting really chilly. That made me think the SEC team that is inevitably going to have to go to either South Bend or Happy Valley or Bloomington in December, they're in for a rude awakening of what those towns might be like in December. But at least we have no shortage of some juicy little tidbits here in the college football playoff rankings. We mentioned Ohio State, Indiana. We mentioned BYU, Arizona State. We're going to get into all of those games. But coming up next, massive get from Adam Breneman. We sit down. Superstar Adam Breneman sat down with James Franklin, head coach at Penn State. So we'll hear from James Franklin coming up next after a quick break.
Coach Franklin, appreciate you taking the time and joining us on College Football Power Hour. I want to start with this. We're seeing Tyler Warren used in a lot of different ways in the offense. I don't remember that stuff being in the offense when I was playing for you. Did you have a talent issue at the position? Was that the problem?
No. That was not the problem. But good question. I think a couple things. We've done some of this stuff over the last couple years, but obviously it's grown. And as you know, when you have a really good player who's also football smart, like sometimes you have really good players, but you can only line them up in one position. They're a slot or they're a Z or they're X. And when you put more on their plate, they just don't play as fast and as confident. This guy, we can line him up anywhere. He really, really understands football. Very, very smart football IQ. But then on top of that, he played quarterback in high school. So, he can throw the ball, which when you're running Wildcat and they know all you're going to do is run, it makes it easier to defend. So the fact that he can throw the ball, the fact that he's comfortable doing a cadence. And then I know it sounds simplistic, but even being able to take a snap under center to run a quarterback sneak with, there's some quarterbacks that can't take a snap under center nowadays. So I just think the fact that he can do all these things really allows you to expand the package.
Drew Allar's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the country right now, probably the best in the Big Ten. I don't think it's getting talked about enough how good he's been. His numbers are almost flawless when you look at his completion percentage and touchdown interception. What's the biggest jump you feel like he's made between year one as a starter last year and year two in 2024?
Probably a weird thing to say, but his mobility. He's down about 10 pounds. I'm not going to say he's going to go 80 on you, but he has the ability to extend plays. I think our O-line's playing well, but there's also a few plays in every game where they get some pressure on you and he's able to extend drives. I think we did a study earlier and every time he extended a drive by getting a first down with his legs, we scored on every one of those drives. And whether it's instead you throw it on first down, and rather than it being 2nd and 16 after a sack, he's able to get it to 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 4, and you stay on schedule. And it's really valuable. And it's hard enough to cover whether it's Tyler Warren or our receivers in a normal timing situation. But now when the quarterback can extend the play, and now you feel the threat of him as well, it can give you some real headaches.
And I think one of the big factors for Drew was the hire of Andy Kotelnicki as your offensive coordinator. Big hire this offseason. You guys have put up 80-plus points in the last 2 weeks. I feel like Coach Kotelnicki has really given your offense a new sense of confidence. How would you assess his performance as your play caller through the first 10 games of the season?
Yeah, he's doing a really nice job. I think the first thing is he had the humility to come in here and say, hey, this thing isn't broke, but there's areas that we definitely need to improve, and spent time kind of learning our verbiage and our system. So we only had to change what we had to change. And I think that really helped the players. And then on top of that, he's coming in at a time where he's got a returning starting quarterback, 2 really good backs, one of the best tight end rooms in America. I think Coach Troutwine's done a phenomenal job. We lost 3 NFL offensive linemen last year, and our guys are playing really well up front this year. And then our wide receivers was the big question mark coming into the season, and they have gotten better. So I think he's done a really good job of taking all the pieces of the puzzle and making us more explosive, which was really our biggest issue that we were missing. Is the explosive aspect. And then obviously the other thing is the creativity.
I think about guys on your roster like Jalen Reed, who's been there for a few years and has developed in your program. Think about Drew Allar and Tyler Warren and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, guys who have been at Penn State their entire career that you've developed in your program. And that's rare in today's college football. A majority of your starters are guys you recruited and committed to you out of high school. And you've probably done as good of a job as anyone of selling the vision of playing at Penn State and not just playing big-time college football. How much does that continuity in your roster factor into success at Penn State when it comes to the development?
Yeah, I think, it's funny. It's funny, Adam. I take a ton of pride that we're a developmental program, but it's almost like in college football, like that's almost a dirty word now, right? Like, I think we have 9 players in our program that we've gotten out of the transfer portal. We're playing Minnesota this week. I think they're at like 16, and that's low. And we're not anti-transfer portal by any means. But what I'm saying is we take a ton of pride in developing relationships with high school players and their families over 2 years, bringing them in, not making any promises, and developing them. And some of those guys don't start till their senior year, like Nick Scott, who's been now in the NFL for 6 years. Some guys play as true freshmen, like Saquon Barkley, and everything in between. And then when we need to go to the transfer portal and get a guy and bring him in and fill a hole, very similar to what people used to do with junior colleges, then we do it. But I think Jay Reed's a great example. He just is playing at a really high level, and he just continues to get better every season. I think he's going to end up getting drafted very high, and I think he's going to end up playing in the NFL at a very, very high level. So, we're proud of him, and I think he's a great example of what we do here.
You've been head coach of Penn State now for 11 years, which is crazy to say, and I obviously was there in the beginning of it. You took over a program, as we've talked about, that was outdated, was under sanctions, and brought it really back to the elite tier of college football, consistently in the top 5 with everything in front of you this season. I'm curious to ask you, have you taken a second to kind of reflect on that 11-year journey and everything that you had to battle through to get it to where it is now, and what's the biggest lesson you've learned during that time?
Yeah, a little bit, Adam. But this is a place with really high expectations and standards. I remember my first year off of sanctions, people weren't happy. And we won the Big Ten championship that year. And even this year, I mean, we've been ranked inside, I think, the top 10 almost the entire season. And people aren't happy, And I think when you're in the middle of Pennsylvania, in between Philly and Pittsburgh and not far from Harrisburg, they're strong personalities in the Northeast and in this state. So no, there's not a whole lot of time where we're taking a deep breath and patting ourselves on the backs around here. It's not that type of environment. But I think people that really understand football, guys like yourself and football people, NFL people, college coaches, GMs, scouts, people that have been doing this for a long time. Those people make it very clear in what we've done here. Our administration, the board, the letterman. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished, but nowhere near satisfied. And understand we still got some work to do.
We talked about Tyler Warren briefly in the beginning, but I wanted to ask about a little bit more about him. I mean, what he's doing right now is generational at the tight end position. And I mean, the impact he's made, not just in when he has the ball in his hands, but even, a lot of your offense revolves around Tyler Warren from a blocking standpoint, him pulling around the edge. I mean, it is extremely impressive. And I think he should be in the Heisman conversation, at least in the top 5 of the Heisman conversation for the impact he's made on one of the best teams in the country. What do you feel like Tyler Warren's elite trait is as a player? You mentioned the football IQ, but is there something else that he just does so much better than anyone else you've seen at that position?
Yeah, I think his elite trait is that he checks every box. It's not like he's 4'3". He doesn't have one of those elite traits, but his elite trait, which I think is even more rare, is he checks every box. I think the other thing is, probably better than anybody, is he's also, God forbid, a tight end who blocks. And a lot of these tight ends who win the best tight end in the country award or whatever award it may be each year, it's based on receiving stats. And this guy's a complete tight end. And that's why he's so valuable. I think the other thing is, when you're tall, I think sometimes people don't realize, when you're 6'6", 260 pounds like he is, and he's running and he doesn't look that fast, but no one's catching him. He takes that wildcat play last week for 50 yards or whatever it is, and no one can catch him. But when you're 6'6" and you're eating up that grass, Mike Gesicki was like that. Theo was like that. So I think his superpower is that he checks every box from a measurement standpoint, from a football IQ standpoint, from a humility standpoint, from a teammate standpoint. He just checks them all. I mean, parents did a great job raising him, and you'll love this too, Adam. We do our shares like a lot of programs do, where the vets get up and talk in front of the team. Yeah. And one of his messages was that as a freshman, he questioned whether he would ever play at Penn State, ever play. And here he is now. So I think it's a great message for all these young guys that are sitting in that room, or maybe even some older guys that just hasn't been their time yet, that here's Tyler Warren, who questioned himself at one point as well. And now look what he's doing. So pretty cool.
Yeah. Last question for you, Coach. I know you meet with the team every day and give them a message, a kind of words of advice and wisdom for the team. Now, with 2 weeks left in the regular season and everything you guys want still in front of you, what's your message this week to your program?
Well, I'm a big believer in simplicity, Adam, and what I would say with that is, number one, we got to be 1-0. That's all that matters. Is we got to find a way to get a win this week. But the other thing that we've been talking about is we got to get better. And if we can get better every single week, and we've been doing that for the last couple weeks, and really take an approach where we're going to be the most improved team in college football the second half of the season. And we've done that the last 2 weeks, where we've won games and gotten better. And we just want to do that again this week at a tough place to play. Minnesota on the road. They're a typical Big Ten team in my mind, and just in terms of how hard they play, how well coached they are. They make you earn everything. And we got to find a way to get a win on the road in the Big Ten, which is tough. And we got to get better. And if we do that, then we'll like where we're going to be at the end of the year.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Coach. As always, appreciate you.
Thanks, buddy. You too, man.
Thanks, Coach.
Shout out to Adam. Hollywood Adam Breneman getting the big name.
Wait, can we make him
on the pod.
MVP? Most valuable Breneman? MVP? Like, I'm going that way.
I like
It
that.
sounds like kind of a backhanded compliment. Like, of all the Brenemans, you're the best
You're
one.
the best Breneman.
You're the
even
best
though there's none
Breneman.
of them.
I don't know how his
know
parents
another
feel about
Breneman,
that.
but you're the best one that I know.
Tom
But no,
Breneman,
seriously.
that's it.
Is that your dad? Or who is that?
No, it's not my dad. That's not my dad. It's a broadcaster.
Oh. Anyways, wait, is Tom Breneman Castellanos?
Yeah.
Is that Tom Breneman?
Yeah, that's Tom Breneman.
A call that shall live in infamy forever.
Well, Fitz has like the funniest look on his face right now.
Yeah,
What's so funny?
I just thought it was fun. The whole Tom Breneman thing just made me laugh. Like, all
Is
I
it
kept
driving to
picturing
deep
was
left field, Tom
the
Breneman?
Castellanos call in the middle of the interview. Like, all I saw, the minute you said it, I just kept thinking about, you asked James Franklin about, success, and all of a sudden, you just hear the Castellanos call right in the middle of it. Emmy should cut that in for us in the middle of the interview, and we can just see how that feels.
To answer Caroline's question, Tom Breneman is not my father.
Okay, good to know. So between you and Tom Breneman, you are
Can we
definitely
please title
the
this
most
episode
valuable
Tom Breneman is not my father? That's all I'm asking. Just call it Tom Breneman is not my father. Go ahead, Caroline. You have an actual job to do. My bad.
Yeah. No, we don't have actual jobs to do. Who are we kidding? But in all seriousness, great interview, Adam. One thing that kind of stuck out to me that I wanted your insight on, when he was talking about how development is kind of a dirty word now. Why is that? Is that the sense of like these kids, 4 stars, 5 stars from high school are coming in and they want to play immediately, and when they hear development, it almost makes them think that they're not going to start immediately? Like, why has development become a dirty word in recruiting?
You just hit the nail on the head, Caroline. When kids hear development, they think they're not going to play right away. And when you play right away in college football, you get more NIL money in year 2 and 3. You get a better draft status. You got the ability to transfer if things go well. And development for coaches is frowned upon because coaches don't have time to develop, really. I mean, you have to win right away. You're not think about how many college programs now that sign 25 players will sign 15 of those guys from the transfer portal, and will sign 10 from high school. The number of high school players getting signed is lower and lower, which is the exact opposite of development. You're signing guys who have already developed that can come in and play right away. So development in college football as a whole has really become less and less and less important. You guys have heard me talk on this show a lot about how coaches always say that college football is like 10% about development. The rest of it is just getting the best talent in the door. But Coach Franklin, I think, has done one of the better jobs in the country of selling the vision of playing at Penn State and what it means to be a Penn State football player and what you can achieve by believing and buying into the Penn State vision, and not just buying into, I'm going to play Power 5 football, Power 4 football now and go to the NFL. You think about the top players on Penn State's roster, they are all guys that have battled it out at Penn State that were signed in high school. Drew Allar, Tyler Warren, Jalen Reed, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. Those guys are all high school recruits that have been at Penn State the entire time. So I think Penn State's done a good job of balancing, getting some transfer portal players in, but also has really developed guys from high school. And the best thing Coach Franklin's done, which ties into development, is that he's retained his own roster. He's recruited his own roster and done really well at preventing guys and keeping guys on his team, preventing them from going to the transfer portal, even when things weren't always pretty. And that's one of the reasons they're having success now, because they have that long-term development, which turns into leadership for your best players.
I have to just wonder, Adam, because if we're being honest for a second, one of the keys that I think in life with development, no matter what you do, is humility. And I don't want to make a blanket statement here, but one thing that I noticed in Jacksonville when you and I were around a bunch of high school kids, it's harder and harder to convince kids that are very successful at what they're doing, and in many cases making a lot of money doing what they're doing, harder and harder to preach a message of, man, we got to get you in the lab so we can get better. And I think that's one of the things. Like, this is such a weird example, but there was a TV show, like a limited run show called Wall Street that was about Mark Wahlberg and all of his businesses. And there was like a mentor to Mark, and this was all happening during COVID, and he's launching all these businesses. And one of his business mentors said the most powerful thing about Mark Wahlberg is that for everything he's accomplished in life, he enters every new venture with humility and an understanding of what he doesn't know. And I think that that's such a difficult and important lesson. And it's tougher and tougher to teach the kids. Like when I was 18, certainly I don't know anything about being a highly recruited athlete, but I do know a lot about being a highly recruited musician. When I was 18, there wasn't anything you could tell me. Like there was just a moment where I thought, hey, I literally at that point in my life was one of the best violinists in the world, and I knew it. And so there was a spot for me where I'm like, I don't need you. And I got humbled when I was around enough people that were better than I was, and I started losing competitions and not getting the moments that you have to step back and say, okay, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And you have to take that step back. It's tougher and tougher for young kids entering college football to understand that while they dominate where they are and they're superstars where they are, they have a whole nother level to get to. And that's just going to be a tough message. How do you teach humility to somebody that hasn't had to learn it? Most kids that are wildly successful don't have to learn humility at that level.
And usually the freshmen going into these schools are already signed on big NIL deals if they're star recruits. So they don't want to hear about developing and how they're going to, work hard in the strength training program for the off season and battle for a starting job. They want to be promised things and play right away. So it's a challenge. Coach Franklin's done a good job. The other thing, Caroline, I thought was interesting is Coach talking about, I think he even said the quote, the people who know football know what we've done at Penn State and
I thought
know
that was
the
powerful.
job we've done.
That's powerful.
And I mean, that program's come a long way. You guys, as you guys know and can tell by listening to the podcast, I know Coach well, and I've seen that process, and I've heard him talk about the challenge that Penn State has presented. And I think he's caught a lot of flack, rightfully so in some regards. Your team has to show up in the biggest games and play better. I think he would agree with that. But he's done a really, really good job in a tough circumstance. I can't believe it's been 11 years that he's been there, but he's done a great job. And Penn State is one of the most consistent programs in college football year after year after year. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that all the time.
I also didn't realize he was there for 11 years.
It's a long time.
It made me reach for my night cream.
So.
I said, been that long? Like, that is crazy.
But there's an honesty to that. And I think you got a really honest answer from Coach that a lot of us wouldn't in that situation. I think if you talk to a lot of people in media or in sports, they'll tell you that respect matters from the people that should know. And that's something that I've always sort of carried like in my back wallet. Like, I don't really care what fans think. I don't really care. Like, at the end of the day, that's not going to change my livelihood. It's not going to change what I work for. I care immensely what I think talented people that work really hard in this business or in any business care. Like, I want that sort of affirmation, confirmation. To hear Coach talk about that, I think is such a real moment of, man, it says, hey, I'm not worried about the outside noise, because the outside noise isn't who I'm here to please. I'm here to please the kids and the coaches and the families and the football minds. I'm here to show what I could do to all of those people. I thought that was a very real, honest answer to Franklin. And it also speaks to a little bit of why some of that outside noise won't hit him as hard, because there are certain people that are tough-skinned enough to look at it and be like, hey, you don't have to like what I do. I'm going to do what I do. Franklin, his answer to that really spoke to me. I thought that was really well done by you and really honest by him.
And I like that he talks about the expectations. He knows that they exist. Like, I understand that you can say you block out the noise as much as possible, but we all have phones. We all listen to the radio. We all listen to things. I don't think that State College is too big of a town. I think that he hears things that are being said, and he understands the expectation. I don't think that he would have taken the job at Penn State if he didn't understand and accept the expectations. But I think there was a part of me listening to him talk about when he came in and the sanctions that Penn State was facing, the position that program was in. I think he acknowledged that those expectations are a privilege, that it's a privilege to have people expect you to beat Ohio State and Michigan and to be in the college football playoff every single year, even though Penn State has fallen short of that maybe in recent years, and they haven't been able to step back up in those biggest moments. I think he acknowledges that, look, we need to be better and we need to win those games, but it is a privilege to be in the position that we're in now, that we can be talked about as one of the best teams in the country, because that's exactly what Penn State is, Fitz.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to, you can be aware of what's happening. You can be aware of expectations. What I don't think you can let happen at any level in any career is let those expectations drive your decision making. You can't let those expectations drive your process. Like, how often do we hear great coaches talk about trust the process, don't worry about the result? Like, fall in love with the process is a coachism for a reason. And if you fall in love with the process and the journey and you're not worried about the result, then you can acknowledge, hey, part of what is expected from this program is greatness, okay? Fans expect greatness. if I start worrying about the fact that that's what fans expect, I change things in what I do. And if I start changing things in what I do for the wrong reasons, it changes the entire, you can worry all day long about the souffle bacon, but the minute you take it out of the stove, if it wasn't the right time coming out of the oven, you just ruined the damn thing. And I think that there was a level of coach of acknowledging, hey, I'm aware of the noise, but I can't let the noise change my process. I understand their expectations. I can't let their expectations change the way I do what I do. I think that's what great coaches have.
Well, also acknowledging that result is incredibly important.
Of course.
That it's both, that it's the process, that it's showing reasons for optimism and understanding. I think Billy Napier is probably a perfect example of that. That, look, we've seen Florida get better week over week. We've seen this team play together and play hard and play tough, and all of those things are great and wonderful, and they're indicative of Billy Napier's process. But at a certain point at that program, where the expectations are so high, just like they are at Penn State, like, you need results after a certain point. And I think the patience for the process has shortened exponentially over the last few years in college football, because everyone expects their team to be the best ever every single year. That when you invest money into your roster, when you're paying your coach $8, $9, $10 million a year, you expect results, but it's also the coach's job to understand that while results matter and while you get paid for results, you don't always get there if you don't have an efficient and effective process.
The most challenging part of that interview was I wanted desperately to ask Coach Franklin about hosting a first-round playoff game in State College. But with 2 games left in the regular season, I would have gotten a bad response to that. He would not have appreciated my question and wouldn't have answered it.
Respect.
So, but I'm like, I want to ask him so bad. I know. And he's doing us a favor by doing the interview, so I couldn't ask it. But I'm like, man, that would be epic for Penn State football. But he would have given me the 1-0 answer.
They taught us that, so peek behind the curtain. When I first started at ESPN, you take an interview class used to take an interview class with this expert interviewer. And one thing that he taught in the whole process is always anticipate the answer. And if you know that you're going to get a coach answer, step back and find a different question. Like, if you know you're going to get blocked on that answer, don't waste the time in the interview asking it. So I respect the hell out of that, Adam. Like, got to look around and be like, hey, you know what? You're right, because he would have tap danced around that like he was Fred Astaire.
No doubt. And because it was the final question I was thinking, and I was going to ask him how's he managing all the expectations? He wouldn't have liked that either. What expectations?
Want to know every week.
So I went with I went with what's your message
I
to
love
your
that,
team
though.
right now?
I also like the fact that you told us he gives a message every day. Like, look, we learned a little bit something right there. Come on now.
I also like that you
MVB.
put him in a corner of, hey, did you not run some of these plays when I was there because you just didn't have the tight end talent?
I wasn't convinced. I'm
sure
not convinced of his
Just
answer
cracking
on that one.
jokes
I feel like he wasn't really selling the answer on that, Adam. I think he was being kind to you. He was like, no.
No doubt. He was being kind.
playing.
What kind of a question that is? Of course it was. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing.
Yeah.
But no, that was an awesome interview. Great insight into James Franklin and a team that looks very much so poised to take over in the college football playoff. That is another question while we're on the topic of Penn State. I thought about this. If Indiana beats Ohio State, what does that mean for Penn State? Like, will a 2-loss Ohio State team get in over a now 1-loss Penn State team? Like, what does the Big Ten race look like if Indiana knocks off Ohio State?
I mean, Penn State gets in.
I think everything's the same, but Ohio State now probably doesn't have a first round. They'll probably be away for the first round of the playoffs. They'll be the second half of the top 12.
Would we have
right?
an Oregon-Indiana Big Ten title game?
Yeah, we'd have an Oregon-Indiana Big Ten title game, and I think in that situation, likely Penn State and Ohio State make the playoff anyway. If
Penn State leapfrogs Ohio State.
Yeah, in the rankings, but they both. I think then you're going to get 4 Big Ten teams in. If Indiana wins, they're a lock. Like
100% a lock.
I think no matter what, we get the 4 Big Ten teams in, unless what I mentioned about Indiana, they lose and they somehow get left out of the playoff with a 1 loss to Indiana. If they get blown out or even, lose by 14
If Indiana
points.
beats Ohio State, are they the number 1 team in the country?
Not above Oregon, because Oregon's also beaten Ohio State.
And Oregon has a harder strength of schedule, but Indiana has beaten their opponents more handedly.
But they'll go to number 2, and then they'll let them play it out in the Big Ten title game, which would be a Big Ten title game for the
That would work
ages.
itself out.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
We'll be.
Can you imagine telling yourself like just 2 years ago that, hey, in 2024, Indiana and Oregon are going to play for the Big Ten
2 months
championship?
ago. 2 months ago. Like, yeah,
It's
it's
true.
Crazy.
True. Wild. All right. Binge, stream, strip. Binge, stream, skip. We're not going to strip. Binge, stream.
There we go.
Please keep that
There
in.
we go.
Please keep that. Just keep that in here.
Take a break. We're going to take a break. Binge, stream, skip. Now I got it. Binge, stream, skip. Obviously,
Congratulations.
binge.
Well done.
It's hard. Words are hard. Talking is hard.
No.
Obviously, it's Indiana, Ohio State. That is the game of the week. That's the game in all of college football. That's the game that we are all going to be watching. That's the game with college football playoff implications on the line. And this feels like really both of the massive games this weekend, both Indiana, Ohio State and Army Notre Dame, feels like the truest, most authentic David and Goliath stories of these Cinderellas in Indiana and Army taking on the giants and the behemoths in college football in Notre Dame and Ohio State, but I do want to focus in on Indiana, Ohio State first. Adam, what's the path for Indiana to beat Ohio State?
The matchup I'm looking at is Ohio State's pass defense against Indiana's pass offense. Indiana's pass offense, one of the best in the country. Curtis Rourke is playing really well. Ohio State's pass defense has been great all season long, except for when they played Oregon. What happened when they visited Oregon? Their last time they played an elite signal caller and Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel shredded Ohio State for 341 yards through the air. Ran the ball really well against this Ohio State defense. So this is by far the best passing offense that Ohio State will face since Oregon. And if Indiana had any different logo, then they'd be talked about as one of the best passing offenses in the nation. I mean, they are that good throwing the football. Indiana has two legit guys at receiver, just like Oregon did. They have Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper Jr. So this Indiana offense is going to have to do what they do best and push the ball down the field. And if they can take advantage of the Ohio State pass defense, which has been really good but struggled against Oregon, that's going to be Indiana's path to victory. I still think, even though that pass game is so important, Indiana has to establish some kind of ground game early in this game just to force Ohio State to play a little bit more press coverage. They play a lot of that cover 4 defense where it really turns into just man-to-man, where it's really cover 0. Safeties are in the box. If they could run the football well, Ohio State will get to that defense, and that's when those shots will be there down the field to take advantage of, and Curtis Rourke's going to have to make some plays.
But what about the other side of this? With the running the football from Ohio State, Adam, like this Indiana defense has been much better against the run than I've given them credit for. I'm the first to admit that. They're bigger than I've given them credit for. And I've had pushback for some friends when I keep saying, no, Ohio State is going to be able to run the football on them because Ohio State has 2 elite running backs. And the fact is this Indiana defense has been absolutely stout up the middle and around the corners when you try to run on them. If Ohio State, like to me, the game plan for Ohio State, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, is to run the football as much as possible and just keep Indiana off the field, right? It feels like this is strength on strength. Indiana's run defense versus Ohio State running the football. If Ohio State wins the line of scrimmage and runs the football well, they're going to be able to dominate this game and wear them down over the course of time, in my mind, right? Like that has to be part of the concern if you're Indiana.
Yeah, it's strength on strength for both sides. It's strength on strength for Indiana's pass offense against Ohio State's pass defense. It's strength on strength with Ohio State's run offense against Indiana's run defense. The best part and the biggest advantage Ohio State gets when they run the football well, which they haven't. I mean, Quinshon Judkins has had multiple touchdowns now in consecutive games. Trayvon Henderson's playing well, is Will Howard is at his best at quarterback when he's not having to force throws down the field, when he's just playing true play action, RPO, distributing the football. He's like a point guard out there. And playing quarterback nowadays in college football is more like playing shortstop than it is anything else. And that being in that position when they're running the ball well, Will Howard can just kind of like RPO, flick his wrist. They got some play action. They got some rollouts. That only happens when they run the football well. So if Indiana's going to stay in this game, they're going to have to slow down Ohio State's run offense. And that doesn't mean stop it completely. But that means that Ohio State can't run for 200 yards in this game. They can't average 5 yards a carry. It means stop getting them to 3 yards a carry. And then forcing, if I'm Indiana, if I'm Kurt Shinetti, I am okay losing this game if Will Howard beats me with his arm. If Jeremiah Smith makes plays on the field, if Emeka Egbuka makes plays on the field, I'm okay. I can go to sleep at night with Jeremiah Smith having 200 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. I can't go to sleep at night with Quinshon Judkins rushing for 200 yards because that we take away their strength and force Will Howard to beat you with his arm. And we've seen Will Howard in some critical moments, got to have it situations. Think about the Oregon Oregon game, hasn't come up big. First play of the game against Penn State, threw a pick six. When you force Will Howard to throw the football on the field, he hasn't been elite in big games, and he's at his worst when you stop the run. So that if I'm Indiana, that's the game plan 100%. Stop.
But let me just, so this is my next layer here on this Indiana thing. In order to stop that, stop that run, you're probably going to have to send extra help, right? We're going to be looking at run blitz schemes from everywhere, right? So if you're sending run blitz all over the place, what you're really doing is creating opportunities one-on-one for great wide receivers. I'm with you. Will Howard has been a problem, but also those wide receivers can run on anybody. And I'm concerned that in order to stop the run that I agree they have to stop, they're going to have to send so much extra help to do it that it creates isolated one-on-one matchups that I'm not sure they're prepared to really handle there too. Like, that's why I keep looking at this. And I got to be clear. I don't think it means, Caroline, that Indiana is a bad team. I just think that defensively, as good as Indiana has been at times, it's a bad matchup for what Ohio State does well.
Well, if I'm Kurt Signetti and I'm saying, okay, Ryan Day, you beat me with your quarterback's arm. I say, if I'm Ryan Day, I'm like, okay. I feel fine doing that because I think Ohio State has the best wide receiver room in the country. And just look at the size matchup. And I know we talk about brand on brand. Ohio State is one of the best brands, if not the best brand in college football, versus Indiana that's not really a brand. But I think that's for a reason. Like, look, this Indiana team is such a great Cinderella story of basically just like an island of misfit toys, of all of these transfers from JMU and Old Dominion that have come together, and now all of a sudden you're undefeated in the Big Ten. But if that's the game plan, is we're going to try and make you beat us through the air. I look at Indiana's two top DBs, Sean Asbury, who is a transfer from Old Dominion. He's 5'10", 199. Well, if he's going one-on-one against Jeremiah Smith, who's 6'3", 215, I like Ohio State's odds. Indiana's second DB, D'Angelo Pons, he's 5'9", 170. Emeka Egbuka is 6'1", 205. Carnell Tate, 6'3", 191. Like, those are just mismatches. And I know that we have seen more talented teams lose to less talented teams. We've seen it so many times this season. But we talk about how this is strength on strength, and it is in every single facet. Indiana's offense versus Ohio State's defense, and vice versa. But it just feels like such a size mismatch to me that any way you want to slice and dice it for Indiana, okay, well, we're going to sell out to stop the run. They can beat you through the air too. Well, okay, we're going to spread out a little bit. Well, I don't think that this Indiana run defense, as good as it has been so far this season, has seen a single back like Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson, much less both of them.
Yeah, and I do think, though, that Indiana's defensive backs have played pretty well throughout the season. You think about D'Angelo Pons, who shut down Washington's tall receiver, Boston, who's like 7 inches taller than him. I think there are DBs that played pretty well. But overall, you both make great points. You can't stop Ohio State's offense. It's just how you slow it down. And the best path to victory for Indiana is to get as many possessions as possible on offense and to get the ball in Curtis Rourke's hands. And the way you do that is by getting 3 and outs or letting Ohio State score fast. You don't want them to hold the ball and dominate time of possession and run the football and have 12-play drives and just chew up the entire clock and dominate the pace of the game. If Ohio State's going to score, you'd rather them score on some big plays and get the ball back for Curtis Rourke and allow it to become that kind of shootout mentality where Indiana's offense can then throw the football around. Those receivers can run around. And I think that's Indiana's path to victory. If this is a slugfest where Ohio State controls the ball for 38 minutes in the game, Indiana's going to lose.
Real quick, I know we're going to move on to the other game. I would say this. I really thought a month ago that this would be a blowout. I do think the closer we get to it, I don't know, to your point, Adam, that you can hold Indiana to a low enough point total to get a blowout out of this. Like, I think Ohio State wins this game, but to ask them to win by 21 plus, which is what it would take to put Indiana out of the college football playoff, would be, in my mind, asking them to score 45 or 50 points. I don't know that that's reasonable in any of this. Like, I think Indiana can put up too many points on anybody to truly get blown out in this football game.
Yeah, I was about to say, if you're asking Ohio State to put up 45, 50 points, well, I think that Indiana could probably put up 35, 40, 45 points with their pass offense that they have. But I do think there's an element, too, with Indiana. I don't think that this Indiana team is intimidated by anyone, much less playing Ohio State in the horseshoe. And that is totally a trickle-down effect from their head coach, that Curt Cignetti is such a just business-like mentality, such a us against the world mentality, such a chip on our shoulder kind of mentality, that you know that he is eating up all of the Indiana versus Ohio State commentary of all of these people that have counted out Indiana and called it a cute story all year long. I'm guilty of it. I called it a cute story several times before.
Me too.
But you know he's eating that up, that I don't think that Indiana is going to go into this game and kind of tuck their tail between their legs and think, oh my gosh, we're playing Ohio State. Like, I don't think that this game is going to be too much or too big for them.
The only thing that concerns me about Indiana is that they have not played anywhere close to the firepower they're going to play against Ohio State. The best team they played was against Michigan. Terrible offense. Maybe the next best offense they played is Washington, who they played pretty well against. They're held them to 17 points, but they have not. This will be a completely different level of football than they've seen this season. That's the only part that scares me. How do they play against the speed, the playmakers, the physicality Ohio State's going to come in and play with? I've been torn on this game. I think Indiana loses by 10 to 12 points, and we end up having a really fun conversation.
I think you're right.
Playoff.
Yeah, Indiana beaten one bowl-eligible team. That's 6-5 Washington. So, we'll see how much the battle test is in play here as Indiana heads to Ohio State. Another game that feels very David and Goliath-y, Army and Notre Dame. And I've been doing a deep dive into the history of Army and Notre Dame, and it has been an absolute blast. Like, I feel like this is a game where both Army and Notre Dame need to go in wearing little three-piece suits and little newsboy caps and talking like in a transatlantic accent. Like, hello, sport. Something like that. That's what this matchup feels like to me. Like, this is the 100-year anniversary of the Four Horsemen game. Go all the way back to this matchup in 1913. It completed the first forward pass. And this game is being played in Yankee Stadium. This is like a college football historian's dream. And, oh yeah, also, by the way, there's a bid to the college football playoff on the line, Fitz.
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest part of this. If you're Notre Dame, again, style points do matter. I think Notre Dame needs style points to just assert where they're going to be in this process. Adam, you've made such an interesting point repeatedly that I can't get out of my head. The fact that, Notre Dame Navy is film for Notre Dame Army to use. This is an Army team that's finally getting a little bit of love from the committee at number 19 this week. But this is a statement moment for Riley Leonard. This is why they brought in. We've talked a lot about what quarterback you bring in and how picking the right quarterback in the transfer portal is so important. This is a Riley Leonard game to me. Like, his ability, got to minimize mistakes. You're going to have to control drives. You're going to have to keep time of possession. You're going to have to make sure that you make some plays with your legs. Like, this feels to me like a gritty, ugly sort of football game, Adam.
It's going to be a fun game. There's a couple of matchups that really stick out. Is the first one, Notre Dame's offense is going to score some points, but Army plays really a bend but don't break. They don't bring much pressure. It's kind of what you think of when you think of Army football, like a bunch of guys who are in the right position. They tackle well, but they're not the most athletic, and they give up some plays. But, man, they make guys earn it. Riley Leonard will have to earn everything in this game. Nothing will come easy. They will score some points, but they won't be able to go on, 2-play, 80-yard drives. That won't happen against Army. And that plays into how Army plays on offense, where they want to play a limited possession, low point total game where they control the time and control the clock. For Army on offense, you just mentioned it, Fitz, such a big part of this is how Army usually struggles against big-time teams that aren't in their league because they don't know how teams are going to play them in their triple option offense. D coordinator always has different schemes for how to try to stop them. And the variation Army sees from week to week is crazy. As you guys know, I call some of their games. So I watch their film, and one defense will play a bear front, which is 5 down defense linemen. Some will play 3 with a bunch of linebackers. Some will play 5 safeties that confuse their quarterback, Bryson Haley. I mean, they see so many different looks so that it's hard to game plan against. But they've now seen how Notre Dame played Navy. And Notre Dame played Navy very well against the triple option. So what does that mean? Notre Dame will probably play Army the exact same way. And Army will now know how Notre Dame's going to play them on film. I think that's a big part in this game. Army offensive coordinator Cody Worley is a hot name in college football right now. Will probably be a head coach very soon. And he has done such a good job with this Army offense. So I'm excited to see what he dials up. The key for Army's offense, and it sounds simple, they cannot turn the football over. If Army doesn't turn the football over at all in this game, wins a turnover margin, they have a real chance at winning the game. I really believe that. If they can take care of the ball, they don't need to score that many points. They just have to take care of the ball. They turned the ball over 4 times this season, best in the nation. Navy turned the ball over 6 times against Notre Dame in that game. That's why Navy lost by so bad in that game. It wasn't a talent difference. It wasn't because the scheme was bad. It was Notre Dame. It was Navy turned the ball over 6 times. So if Army can take care of the football, run the ball, don't make mistakes. Cody really loves to take those shots over the top, and Bryson Daly, their quarterback, has thrown the football a decent amount this season. He's got a 200-plus quarterback rating right now, so there will be shots to take, but they got to be strategic and can't force anything in there because that ball will be so critical in this game against
Feels
Notre
like
Dame.
time of possession is so critical in this game because if Army wants to hold on to the football for 45 minutes, they can. They just run, and grind the clock out, dominate time of possession.
But so can Notre Dame. I'm just saying, like, Army's defensive line is trash against the run. Notre Dame might just go in it. That we might not see either team try and throw the football in this. I don't know.
I mean, it could be.
No, that's why I really think it'll be close because I think that's what's going to happen. They're both going to run the ball. The Army won't give up any big plays. Notre Dame will go on 12-play drives, and I think Army will score some points. So it's going to be a
7, 8, 9-minute drives. Army gets the ball in the first quarter. Notre Dame gets the ball in the second quarter. Like, that's how I think it's going to feel. And that makes field position even more important because I don't know how much I trust either of these offenses to drive 95 yards down the field. That if you're able to force turnovers or get favorable field position, then I think that's huge. I think that's absolutely huge for either of these two teams. Those are the marquee games of the weekend. A couple of maybe secondary games that also have massive implications. We alluded to this at the top of the show. It's BYU Arizona State. And don't look now, but Arizona State is the most quiet 8-2 team in the country. I mean, they're coming off of a massive win at Kansas State this past week. They have a legitimate playmaker in their running back, Cam Scadaboo. They have a mobile dual threat quarterback in Sam Levitt, who has taken care of the football, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions all season long. He's been a little bit banged up, but still. This is such an impassioned Arizona State team. And then you look at BYU coming off of their first loss of the season. How do both of these teams respond? Arizona State that has won 3 consecutive Big 12 games versus BYU that was just handed their first loss of the season. Jake Retzlaff's, I think fair to say, his worst game of the season. How do you see this one playing out? What is Arizona State's path to victory, Adam?
It's Cam Scadaboo, who you just mentioned. He is the true difference maker in this game. Best player on the field. BYU's run defense is solid, has played pretty well. They shut down Kansas's run game, even though they lost. But Cam Scadaboo needs 200 yards in this game for Arizona State to win. ASU needs to establish the run and control, again, time of possession, control the clock, and allow Cam Scadaboo to do what he does best. When he touches the ball 30-plus times, Arizona State, I think, only has 1 loss, and obviously, and when he has the ball and has won most of those games. So when Scadaboo has the ball, he makes big plays, and getting him touches when BYU will be scheming it up and trying to stop him from getting the ball so often is going to be really the key. Trying to get Scadaboo the ball on the perimeter, on some sweep plays, on some screen plays, not just traditional handoffs for the running back. He's used really more like Deebo Samuel in that offense than any other than a true running back. So I'd watch him as the key. Get number 4 the ball.
The only thing I'd add to that, Adam, is that Arizona State needs to be patient. They don't turn the football over a lot, which is a real strength to this football team. They got to be patient through this because BYU is going to key on stopping that run game. Got to remember, and their quarterback so far this year, I think only has 4 interceptions, if I'm right. Only thrown 4 picks this year. But Arizona State's done a nice job of not turning the football over. They're going to have to in this game make sure that they do the same thing because BYU's defense is a strength. You don't want to let that defense become opportunistic.
And I'm excited to see how Jake Retzlaff, BYU's quarterback, responds to a little bit of adversity. First time all season. How do they respond? I mean, everyone was talking about how good they are for a long time. And there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, and then they lose to Kansas. And now everyone's questioning, should BYU even make the playoff? If they lose, you lose one game, it's done.
Another game that I'm streaming this weekend, and it should be straight. Fitz. Is Ole Miss on upset alert against Florida this weekend?
No. Ole Miss is going to roll Florida. The field goods of Florida are just going to die off this week. Ole Miss is going to go with the thunder of the gods. Yeah. The field goods of Florida are nice, but Ole Miss right now is playing like a national championship contender. They're not playing like a team that's going to sit here and dance with Florida. Florida's cute. Florida's not where Indiana was. It's cute. But this is the same Florida team that's just got their asses kicked by Texas a few weeks ago. This is going to be another one of those. It's going to be a Texas
But it's not
one.
the same Florida team. This is not the same Florida team that got their asses kicked by Texas a few weeks ago, because they have their quarterback back, because they have their running back Montrell Johnson back, because they have Elijah Badger back, who just put up like 4 billion yards against, I know it's a crap LSU defense, but still. This is not the same Florida team. And I think DJ Lagway has proven in all the opportunities that he's gotten. Graham Mertz tears his ACL against Tennessee. Well, DJ Lagway takes Florida to overtime against Tennessee. Look at the Georgia game. Even when DJ Lagway got hurt and got carted off before halftime, that was a tie game with 9 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. And then they got their butts whipped by Texas. And then they beat LSU. And now all of a sudden you have a Florida team that actually believes that they can win big time football games.
So, yeah, but
I'm
so
going
does
to pick
Ole
Ole Miss to win.
Ole Miss believes they can win.
Upset alert. It's official. They're on upset alert.
No, first of all, they haven't played a defensive line like they're about to find for Ole Miss. And second, you just named all these players that can help Florida score points. That's cool. What are they going to do to stop Jackson Dart from throwing for 600? I mean, Jackson Dart and this Ole Miss offense is going to do whatever it wants, however it wants to Florida. In my mind, Ole Miss wins this game by 3 touchdowns.
I'll take Florida to cover 21 points. I'll take that bet all day long. Thank you very much.
Let's go.
You owe me $1 million.
I put it on the tab.
I think Ole Miss wins this game by 7 points. I think it's a close game. With the way DJ Lagway is playing, with the way Billy Napier has those guys playing, the excitement they have right now.
I'm just forgetting that they got their asses kicked by Texas. I'm just reminding.
It's not the same team.
Without DJ Lagway.
Yeah, DJ Lagway wasn't on the defensive side of the ball, giving up everything. Without DJ Lagway.
I never said Florida would stop Ole Miss's offense, but I think Florida's going to score some points.
They might get to 21 and they'll lose 42-21. Like Ole Miss is just going to make it look like video game football when they have the ball. I'm confident on this one. Ole Miss is just going to score Ole Miss is going to look like the Lions did last week.
The Ole Miss Georgia game. And has all of a sudden forgotten that things were ugly against Oklahoma and Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. And I know that was a long time ago.
Wait, isn't this where I say that now Ole Miss believes they can win these sorts of games? Come on. Lane Kiffin's got them going. Ole Miss headed to the college football playoff. They're not going to let the foot off.
Ole Miss winning these kind of games versus Florida winning these kind of games. Like the Ole Miss AD did not just put out a statement saying that Lane Kiffin's job was safe. Because they didn't need to. Because these two programs are in drastically different positions. I think it's going to be close. I think Ole Miss wins. But I don't think that it's going to be, you sit Jackson Dart at halftime and let all the backups in the second half. I don't care what the final score is.
The game will be out of control in the fourth quarter. Mark my words. And we bring this back on Saturday when I'm right. And the game's out of control in the fourth quarter.
Get them a clip.
Clip it off. Sip your tea.
I'm going to sip my tea and just be confident about my
tea and enjoy it.
You guys know that Penn State Minnesota is a trophy game?
Is it?
Yeah,
because everybody gets a trophy.
The land grant trophy. It's a trophy. It's a big game. It's a rivalry. Penn State Minnesota.
Land grant?
Yeah,
that's the most boring
Adam,
trophy
if you and I have tug of war in the backyard, but we give a trophy out at the end of it, it doesn't make it a big game. You'd win, by the way.
Why is it called that?
I don't know the history. I just know I played in it one year. I had 2 catches for about 22 yards. Who's counting though? I don't
Pop off king.
You get a trophy. They bring it to the locker room, and it's funny because like none of the players know it's a trophy game, so they bring you a trophy and expect everyone to like cheer and respond, and everyone's like, "What is this?" But yeah,
is it a cool trophy?
It's huge. Look it up, land grant trophy. It's a big one.
I'm not going to.
It's on CBS. I mean, big game, prime time. Big game, Penn State, Minnesota, must win for Penn State. Our guy, James Franklin, we heard him on the pod. He sounded dialed in earlier on that interview. I like
this episode was so good earlier, and now we're just
That's our sicko game of the week is Penn State, Minnesota. The very famous land grant game, land grant bowl, land grant off, whatever it is, land grant-a-thon. I also just learned that South Carolina, Missouri is a trophy game. Didn't know that either. The Mayor's Cup. Battle for Columbia. Let Learn something new every single day. That's what we're here for. That's going to do it for us today. He is Jason Fitz. You can follow him on Twitter at Jason Fitz. You can follow Adam at Adam Breneman81. You can find me at Caroline Fenton 1. Always appreciate all of you for stopping by the podcast. If this is your first time, hello, welcome in. If you're a regular, thank you. Like, subscribe, review, rate, all the great things. Tell your friends about it. Tell an enemy about it. Tell Cam Scattaboo about it because we love him here on the podcast. We will be back on Saturday night and Sunday morning with a full recap of all of the Week 13 matchups right here on the College Football Power Hour. We are out.